Right, let's return to a story that we've been talking about this morning. NASA says 2 astronauts who went into space for 8 days will now have to wait 8 months to be rescued.
Let's talk more about this with the astrophysicist Dr. Chris Copperwheat from Liverpool John Moores University. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
For the average person, for many of us, it is an absolutely unimaginable scenario, but this is something that astronauts are prepared for, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So this would have been one of the contingencies they would have trained for, they would have prepared for. Of course, it's a lot different between sort of talking about it on the ground, about all the various options and contingencies to living it. I imagine from their perspective, they are probably pleased that a decision has been made, because it's gone on for a very long while now, weeks and weeks and weeks, that NASA's been going backwards and forwards, examining the options. At least we do now know what's going to happen, and they can sort of train and prepare and get themselves, mentally prepared for what's to come, for the months to come.
And as you say, the reality is very different from theorising it. So how do they mentally prepare for it? And what is the sort of preparation in terms of getting your head around coming to terms with being away for much longer?
Yeah, well, I mean, excuse me, for both of them, this is not their first protracted stay on the space station. They are astronauts. They've been astronauts for a long time. They've been test pilots for a long time. Before they were astronauts, they were both in the military. So they're used to these high-risk situations. In any one of these sort of situations, there is contingency plans and preparation. They're kind of made of the right stuff, I guess. We think of space flight these days as being relatively routine, because it happens so often. We have so many launches going to the space station, but it's still a dangerous business. The people involved, still. They train for months and months and months. And this is part of the reason why they're going to be up there for so long, because the missions that are planned, the flights up and down are planned, months to years in advance. So they're coming down on the next scheduled flight, the next bus down, which will not be coming along for another 6 months, not till February.
And then when you think about the journey they made, because the part of it was the rocket boosters, I think. Was it the boosters that failed?
Yes.
Would they have been aware of that as they were on board the ship actually travelling to the space station? Yeah,
they would have been monitoring all of the systems on the ship as they went. So there was about 5 of the thrusters failed as they were docking, while they're completing their docking.
5 of how many?
5, I think there's 28 total.
Right.
So it's a small fraction. But what's since been discovered is there is a fault and now a known issue, essentially a ring of material, Teflon material, expanded under pressure and temperature to block the transfer of the fuel through the thruster. So this is a known issue. I'm sure that Boeing right now are looking at resolving this issue. There's been a lot of testing in orbit, but the decision's been made that it's not safe for them to come down. So the capsule now will still return to Earth. It will return unmanned. So one of the things they've been doing is updating the software on the spacecraft so it can make that unmanned journey back to the ground. So now NASA and Boeing will be concentrating on the safe recovery of that capsule. And then the other big decision they've got to make is there'll be a SpaceX flight going up now probably in September, which would have had a 4-man crew. That will now have a 2-person crew. Who those 2 people will be and who will stay behind, the decision's not been made yet. The 2 astronauts who are currently in orbit are going to have to do the jobs of those 2 people that would have been coming up. So there's lots of complicated logistical challenges that people are facing.
And quite embarrassing for Boeing, the company that made the spaceship that took them up there in the first place, knowing that a spaceship made by rival company, SpaceX, is the one that's coming to the rescue.
Yes, this is not what you predicted. So the genesis of this goes back to 2009. It was during the Obama administration where it was decided that we would, NASA would put these contracts in place for commercial crew. For reasons of competition and pushing innovation, they wanted to have 2. And if you had gone back then and said, which of those 2 companies is the safe bet and which one is the risk, you would have said Boeing, the established company with the legacy of spaceflight that goes right back to the Apollo missions. You'd have thought they're the safe bet, they're going to deliver. SpaceX, the much younger company, is the riskier one. So it's quite surprising the way it's worked out. And that's really due to a different kind of project management environment, a different funding environment, something that Boeing isn't used to, and the more sort of, flexible company, SpaceX, being able to adapt to that.
And Chris, as you mentioned, these astronauts, they're made of different stuff, aren't they? But what about their friends and family? How do they prepare and come to terms with the fact that they're going to be away for much longer?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess, that, again, their families are probably used to their family members going off on these risky trips. So they will have some experience.
Do they get prepared by NASA? Do they get a lot of support?
They will have a huge amount of support, absolutely, from NASA. You know, there are teams of people to support them, but it must be very difficult for them, absolutely. Yeah. So perhaps it's the families who are the biggest victims of this. I mean, the astronauts, ultimately, this is what they want to do. They want to be in space. They want to be working in space. So for these guys, there's definitely a silver lining, even though there are some inconveniences involved.
Some inconveniences. That's a very good way of putting it. Well, Dr. Chris Copperwheat, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
Thanks very much. And you know, the other training they'll need is for doing interviews, because there's going to be so much interest when they come back to Earth in hearing the story and hearing about their experiences. So I hope they're getting some media guidance as well on that.
And I hope they get a film made out of it as well.
Yeah.
You know, there you go.